Welcome to What to Do When, a podcast from real lawyers with real perspective, where we explore a variety of legal issues and scenarios. Each week, we focus on a new topic and discuss what to do when and if any of these legal scenarios ever happen to you or a loved one. With over 40 years of combined legal experience, our hosts offer their unique perspectives and insights on a range of real-life legal situations.
Hey, welcome back. It's been a while. We're here at Critzer Cardani doing our podcast in Richmond, Virginia. I'm Jackie.
And I'm Scott. Jackie, what's on the docket for today?
Today, what to do when you are becoming a blended family.
Ooh, what do you mean by blended family?
Sort of a yours, mine, and ours, maybe. It's when a husband and wife have children, or partners, to be more socially correct. When partners who are coming together to either live together or get married have children from prior marriages, and so it's blended, right? You're bringing more than just yourselves into a new relationship.
Yeah, and marriage can be a really important part of that because there's a stability that the court recognizes when this marriage versus when you're living together. There's not those protections sometimes aren't as readily available. I'll say it that way, but that's just a thought. But
well, and you know, one question that I think a lot of people want to know is, okay, my ex-husband is now living with a woman and he's going to get married to her, and we share physical custody. Can I now get primary physical custody because he's living with someone and she has children, he has children, maybe there's not as much space as he used to have. Fill in the blank of whatever the reason might be, but can, now that he's in a new relationship and getting married or is married and in a blended family, and maybe the children, the girl's children have to share a room and they didn't have to before, is that enough to change custody? I think I get that question quite a bit.
And what would you answer? Is that material change? Is I guess what we're looking at?
Well, I would say that a remarriage is absolutely a material change, but that's not the only question you have to ask, right? The second question that goes with that is, and does it then necessitate a change in custody?
And I'm even seeing judges on the remarriage finding that not to be in itself material change. They're saying it's definitely a change, but how is it affecting the child? So You'd have to build in that. And I don't know. I don't think the judges are too sympathetic that they have to share a room now and those kind of things. I just don't. I understand that your child or you may feel like that's a big deal, but we're talking about litigation issues and how the court's going to look at that. So sometimes what we think is a big deal, the court may be like, maybe not.
And we're not talking about male children and female children sharing rooms. I mean, that shouldn't be the case, right? You shouldn't have. In my opinion, I would take that case all day long.
Especially when they're not related by blood or marriage and they've never been together before. That's just a recipe for disaster.
And just about every scenario, I can't think of when it wouldn't be a situation that would go badly. Or, sometimes you've got a younger, let's say a elementary age female child, and you've got a high school female child. Even that's not, it's maybe uncomfortable more for the high school student than the younger child.
Right.
But I don't know that would necessitate a change in custody just because they were having to share a room, even with a big age disparity.
Yeah, and so what you're looking for in that, if you're opposed to it, is really looking for something that materially affects your child, which is kind of hard to find sometimes. But on the other side is, if you're entering into a blended family or you have a blended family, one of the biggest things I think people rub against is parenting styles.
Oh, I think for sure. You mean there's more than one kind of parenting style?
Is there more than two?
Not in that relationship, whatever relationship it is. We hope it's just two. Well, what are your thoughts about parenting style and blended relationships and blended families?
Well, I think you have to take somewhat an accounting of where you are as far as the children. So if you've got very young children, you can probably mold into something you both agree to and work it out. I think if the children are a lot older and have been in a parenting style under you for a long time, I think you really have to work with Grace and the other parent and try to make your styles not opposed to each other as much as possible. But I think one of the greatest things, quite frankly, is what you can learn from the other parent if you're open. Both Jackie and I have that situation. So, if you're open to their parenting style, to at least look at it, you don't have to necessarily assimilate their whole style, but
sure,
you can learn a lot that you didn't see. Your eyes can be opened to things, better ways to do things. And so the trick to me is being humble enough to say, I don't got all the answers, because nobody does. I don't care who you are and what you say, but there's no parent out there that has all the answers. The real question for me always is, are the children loved, and do they have a consistency in their life? Because those are two things that make healthy kids. You know, I've seen parents have very, 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 very loose parenting styles, but they're always consistent in that style, and they really love their kids. And I've seen those kids to flourish as much as parents who have been very strict, and same thing with a lot of love and everything, and the kids flourish. So I think sometimes we get caught up in things, but you know, there are points that matter. And well, the biggest thing is make sure you have that discussion. And you know, you can say real easy because you're in love, oh, I'll do whatever you want to do, you know, but you haven't even explored it. So I think that's a piece that, depending on how good you are communicating at that point, you may want somebody to sit down with you and walk that through, so you can both really, somebody can push through it a little bit and say, what do you really think about this, and what do you really think about that, you know? For instance, the 14-year-old comes home and he's been smoking marijuana, and you catch him, you know, how you handle that as a family is a big deal. And you know, say it's our kids, but it's Jackie's child. You know, my feeling is I sort of take a little bit of a back seat to that. Obviously, I'm there for advice and counsel and support and everything like that. But you know, it just depends. But my point is, you have to think about those things. You have to employ those things, and you have to be. If you're going to get in a relationship with somebody who has kids, even if you don't have any really, you've got to be accepting of their style of discipline, their style of communication, their style of all those things. That's my Porsche going down the road. Somebody else just stole it, I guess. Anyways, I don't know if you heard that, but that's where I'm at. I just think that's a very important matter to consider.
I think too, you know, when you have a blended family, so Scott brought up a really good scenario where you've got the, you know, one of your teenage children you find out is experimenting with marijuana. Let's just use that as the example, because it's so much more readily available for our young people, whether it's through their friends' parents or it's somebody at school, wherever it is. Let's just use it as the example. In this picture of a blended family, you can't ever leave out the other parent. So I'm remarried. My children still have a father who's very active in their lives, as well as their stepfather, who's my husband. And if this were going on in my home, of course my husband would know about it because it's in the home, but he would know about it from here's the newsreel, here's what's going on. I need to go and call their dad and have a discussion, and then we can talk more about it. I think that having that other parent's input is valuable, at least for my children. And we have a situation where our children go and visit with their dad every other weekend. It's not a shared custody situation, but we treat each other like it's a shared custody situation, because I think it's his right as their dad to know what's going on, whether it's sports, school, discipline issues. It's the good news and the bad news. I don't wait for him to ask, hey, how are the kids doing? No, I have them. It's my obligation, I think, and my duty to go ahead and share that information. Maybe he doesn't respond. That's not his style. He usually says something back. But I know a lot of you are dealing with parents on the other side who don't respond, who don't ask questions, who seemingly don't care what's going on. Maybe that other parent would say, yeah, I gave him the marijuana, right? That's probably one of the worst case things you can imagine. But I think involving the other biological parent, if they're in the picture and if it's appropriate, right, that's important, and that you consider their input when you're disciplining inside your home as well. I think Scott's situation is a little different than that, but you know, you've got to understand that blended families aren't just blending you and your spouse and the children, but that you've got other family members outside of just what's going into your home that you need to consider as well. So when it comes to the parenting styles, you know, I think Scott brought up a good point. Whether it's routine, expectations, is there a bedtime? I don't care how old the kid is, 5, 15. Is there an expectation that there's a quiet time in the house? Is there an expectation that People are going to do their chores. They're going to keep their room clean, keep their bathroom clean, participate in cleaning up after dinner or making whatever. And those seem sort of menial, but after days and weeks and months of not communicating about those things, they become hot button issues.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is communication too, is the second point I would make, is communication. And even simple things like, for me, sometimes I have very good communication with all my kids, and sometimes they'll call me and say, hey, Dad, I'm going to Jimmy's for a couple hours after school. Mm-hmm. And that's been my routine for so long. I didn't always have somebody to go say, hey, and remembering to do that, hey, wife. Just informing, just to let them know so they know what's going on. Maybe they're making dinner, or maybe they have plans, or maybe, but that goes both ways, and it has to be, you just have to think about that. For some of us, it's just a change because we're used to being more on our own, and you get used to parenting on your own. Or some of us, it's the relationship we have with our children. We're used to just kind of going back and forth and having an open. So for me, sometimes when I've communicated something, I don't think to re-communicate it, and that's really important, to try to remember to re-communicate something that's already been communicated. Because just because you communicated to your kids, you don't want to keep blindsiding your spouse and where's John? Well, he's spending the night at Jimmy's.
Right.
Well, absolutely. I had plans to go do this with him. I didn't know he was doing that. Whatever. And it's, and as Jackie said, whether it's chores or whatever, those things are important to lay out and have expectations and communicate expectations. That is so huge. I think that's the biggest thing. So many people think, and I'll probably get myself in trouble here, but sometimes I think men and women are different. Sometimes women think somebody should know what they're thinking.
Yes.
And men tend to not want to say what they're thinking. So it's the same problem. It's just a different way of thinking about it. But my point is, you can't have expectations that are uncommunicated and expect them to be followed, especially in a blended family. You want a disaster quickly. So communication matters very much, and it's almost to the point you want to be over communicative more than less. So, or
find a way to put a chalkboard or a whiteboard or a calendar or something, so that that's not done the night before, but something that communicates what's going on. Oh, I thought I told you about that sporting event. I thought I told you about piano lessons. I thought I told you that I had a work meeting and that you were on deck for transporting all the kids everywhere they need to go. Right? I mean, these things happen. I think important too, when you've got when you have children from both sides and they have visitation or some sort of shared custody or something that leaves your unit and then comes back, I think that is really an important piece to consider as far as communication is concerned. You will find yourself in a lot of hot water if you are making decisions with the other parent, not your new spouse, but with the other parent about your parenting time.
Your old spouse.
Your old spouse, right? And not communicating that to your new spouse. That can really create a lot of heartache and heartburn, especially if all the kids have a good relationship, and the plan is you worked it out, so there's every other week and everybody's together, or every other weekend and everybody's together, whatever that schedule looks like. It's really important, especially on parenting schedules, to just go, again, communicate what is going on, even though those children aren't shared by your new spouse.
Yeah, and there are a lot of apps that can help with that communication. There's all kinds of parenting apps and things like that, if that helps. Some people aren't, calendar centric, and that doesn't work for them, and that's okay. That's where you have to be a little, like Jackie said, there's all kinds of ways to communicate. I think one of the things we run into as older kids is our kids work. So, we never know who's going to be home for dinner, who's not. And at some point you have to realize that you got to roll with some flexibility. When it's that, I cannot keep 10 people's schedule, not even 2 people's really, in my head, especially when it's changing weekly and all those things. I probably could do it if I really wanted to be mindful of it, which is a very important thing. But my point is, in communication in a blended family, sometimes you have to just realize that mistakes are going to happen, and it's okay. And there's no evil purpose under the rug that we're just trying to keep you out. And so all those things to me are all communication 101 things, but I think a lot of times we don't think about it when we enter into a blended family, because, habits of communication, which may have been good in one situation, may not be so good in the second. And you just have to be again, humble enough. I use that word a lot, but it's very important. Humble enough to go, you know what? I need to be mindful of my way of communication. Am I being effective? Am I leaving my new spouse or significant other out? And how can I do a better job of putting them in the loop?
I'm going to put Scott on the spot here. And Scott, have you learned anything from your spouse?
Not one thing more than a million things. Very good. So, I've learned a lot. Absolutely. I've learned a tremendous amount. I'm very thankful for that. But, there are times still, I have some stubborn streaks, I guess, and so do we all, and there are things that I believe in. But I think overall, it's just learning, like you said, you learn, if you're willing to, you'll learn a lot. Mm-hmm. And, even their communication style you might find is a little better than yours, and you may need to tweak yours, for heaven's sake. So.
Well, I'll tell you, my husband is really, really good at not elevating. So if you get a teenager with a hot temper, he is so good at just maintaining a level, even temperament, and I am not as good at that. I get hot and I'm ready to go, and part of that is what we do for a living, right? We can recall conversations over the last 5 years that people, what do you mean I said that? No, this was the conversation. Here's the context. Here's how it went. And so that's our training, right?
Yeah.
We're trained to do that, and sometimes that carries over, at least it does for me, it carries over into the family relationships and the family dynamic too. But I am learning from him, and I've learned from him how to this isn't the time to be hot-headed. This is the time to maintain a cool, calm disposition and just work through some of the things. You can be upset. You can be disappointed.
Yes,
you can be angry. You can feel all the things, but still not lose your cool and maintain a good conversation. And you're going to have a better outcome. So just by way of example, that's something I've learned and have grown to admire greatly in what my husband does.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, I think the last thing I think is really, really important in blended families that probably isn't really legal, but time matters. Time with your spouse or significant other matters. And when you have a blended family and you're doing a lot of things or a lot of activities, you've got to carve out those times. Like my wife and I have made Mondays matter. We try to do a date night every Monday. And sometimes we're going to a kid's practice and taking a walk at the practice while the kid's practicing and not watching the kid practice because our time needs to matter.
Sure.
So those are things you have to figure out, but you need to be intentional about it, because when you go from one kid to even 2 kids, or 2 kids to 5 kids, or 3 kids to 8 kids, or whatever it may be, or
whatever your Brady Bunch looks like.
Whatever your Brady Bunch looks like. Schedules of the kids and their activities, and if you don't prioritize that, you will lose it. And then you'll be 5 years down the road, or 5 months down the road, and say, what's your name?
Disconnected. Sure.
Where do you live? And people can be super creative with that. Some people are good about going to bed at 9 o'clock and spending 2 hours every night together. Or,
sure.
It doesn't have to be some formulaic from my perspective. It just needs to be intentional for both parties to know that both parties, it's not just a one-way street. It's not just me making sure I have time for Jackie. It's Jackie making sure that I'm important, whatever it is. Sorry,
sure.
Daryl. Wouldn't say anything. No. But my point is, it's so important to have that two-way street of intentionality, that both of you are on the same page, and that can change. For a while you may try early bedtime. For a while you may try something else, but sometimes. Again, flexibility to me is the key in that. It's not about the day or the activity. It's about being together and showing each other that, look, I'm missing this child's game because you're that important to me, and we set this up, and I'm not going to change that. So, and then, sometimes it's the other parent saying, what, it's okay. We can do this Tuesday night. I'm totally fine with that.
Right. Whatever
it may be. And I'm not saying either one's right or wrong. I'm just saying being flexible, but realizing it's intentional is such an important thing.
Oh gosh, I would agree with that. And as the bigger the family, the bigger the blend, the more important I would even say it becomes, because I know Scott has a tribe, and we have a tribe, and we have sports, and we have music, and we have academic teams, and now I think we all know a new little one at home, and it can really.
She's actually in the office.
Take a toll. She is here visiting today. It can really take a toll on the relationship if you're not truly being intentional about growing and nurturing the relationship that brought you all together to begin with.
All right. So what did we learn today?
Oh gosh, we have three main takeaways, right? The first one, parenting styles. Make sure you talk about them, whether it's routines, expectations, or chores, whatever that is. Make sure you compare parenting styles, and if they're not compatible, figure it out.
And parenting expectations. And second one would be communication matters. It's making sure that you're communicating with everybody in the room, so to speak, and making sure all those doors of communication are open and everybody knows what's going on at all times. And that's an easy one to let slip. Like I said, I think that's one I slip on a lot sometimes when my older son will call me and say, I'm one of my buddies after work, and I'm going home at that moment or talking to somebody else at that moment, and you don't always think to go home and go, hey, by the way.
One less for dinner.
Yeah.
Just something that simple.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Oh, I didn't know. I would have totally changed the dinner menu if I knew it was going to be 5 instead of 6 or 4 or whatever.
Absolutely. And then lastly,
the time matters, and that just is time with your spouse where you are making time to nurture that relationship despite the pressures of first of all, you've got a new marriage or new relationship that you're trying to grow, but you also have these extra pulls with the various schedules and things that you have with the two different groups of children. So making time a priority with your spouse, whatever that looks like, and communicating about that time and coming together and focusing together, both being intentional mutually.
All right, folks. Thank you for joining us today.
Next time, I think a good follow-up would be a co-parenting. When we talk about parenting styles, when we talk about these things, co-parenting with your new spouse is one thing, right? But co-parenting with the spouse that you're not married to anymore, and how to navigate some of these issues with that parent and the blended family will be coming to you soon. So thanks for joining us. Be sure and like and subscribe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of What to Do When. For more episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, and we encourage you to check our archives to listen to previous topics. Tune in next week for a new episode and some fresh perspective from Critzer Cardani.